Here we go. Ball up top, episode 10. We're getting to the nitty gritty part of the season, approaching March. We thought we would give you an episode here right after the initial top 16 bracket review was released yesterday on Saturday. Obviously, we had some big games yesterday, and we're talking about this on Sunday after, so things might have changed slightly with Michigan and Duke and, Houston and Arizona playing. But just want to go through the one seeds to kick it off right now. We've got Michigan at the number one overall seed, Duke at the number one seed, Arizona at the number one seed, and Iowa State at the number one seed. Anything jump out there to you guys? I mean, I know we had, Duke and Michigan played each other, and Duke took care of business yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into it, the top three were pretty much set. The
Yeah.
question was going to come down to the four with Iowa State, UConn, put Houston, and Illinois in that conversation as well. And ultimately they decided to go with Iowa State, and then Iowa State lost at BYU. So not a bad loss by any means, on the road to Big 12 against a pretty solid team despite their injuries. But you would think that UConn's in contention to jump them. Um, Houston's probably not, considering they lost to Arizona. And then obviously, like you said, we had the Duke Michigan matchup. So in my eyes, I think now it's probably Duke one. You could put Arizona two, Michigan three, but I think Michigan and Arizona is just going to kind of come down to the wire between those two. And I think those three, for the most part, are pretty much locked in as one seeds, unless they suffer some pretty catastrophic losses down the stretch. But I think really the conversation is that four seed with Iowa State, UConn, Houston, Illinois in conversation. And right now, I'd probably give the edge to UConn after these weekend games shaked out.
Yeah, they made me look bad because I put a poll up on Friday asking who people thought should get that last number one spot, and the options were Houston and UConn. And then they went through Iowa State in there, but yeah, Josh, to your point, like the first three were pretty set. I think we knew that that's kind of how that was going to shake out, and then I really was expecting it to be Houston, but they did play earlier in the week, and Iowa State took that head to head. And then the other thing they called out, we'll jump to the two line, but even having UConn a little bit ahead of Houston, with some of their like higher end wins being a good bit stronger than what Houston's best three or four wins are. But yeah, I mean, I think Duke rises to that number one overall slot now. This will pretty much be changing by the day at this point for all of these seed lines with what three most teams have like five games left, I think, five or six. Um, so things will be, fluid, changing by the day. But yeah, I would probably go Duke, Arizona, Michigan, and then UConn probably now. But I mean, they lost was it Wednesday? They lost to Creighton.
Yeah, by like 12 at home. Creighton is what 500 team. I mean, I get it happens. Creighton's kind of had Hurley's number. I feel like the last couple of years. I think they've won 3 years in a row in UConn.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I agree with you guys completely. I think Duke is in the driver's seat. It's tough to say, like, they just beat Michigan, so you can say that they're the better team. I mean, they're splitting hairs. Both those
yeah,
teams are very talented. I will say, Duke playing in the ACC, a little more favorable path to maintain that number one overall seed, probably. So I would not be all too surprised if they were able to close these next 2 or 3 weeks at that top seed. Um, as we get going into our two seed line, we've got our number 1, 2 seed UConn, then followed by Houston, Illinois, and then Purdue.
yeah,
Um, you know, not a not a lot of call outs here. Like Houston struggled offensively against Arizona this weekend. Illinois, lost at the buzzer at UCLA. Purdue had a big win against Indiana, but they've been shaky throughout the year. And
They lost
you
on like Tuesdays. I think all these teams lost this once this week.
and then yeah, UConn against Creighton. Yeah, I think they all did lose. So it's it's tough recency to go like, do any of these teams belong to be on that 1 seed line? Do any of these teams, do you think, should they be on the 3 seed line?
I mean, there's maybe an argument for Florida over Purdue. Um, I expected it to be Purdue, along with the other, UConn, Houston, Illinois. I think I thought more likely that one of those was a 1 seed on the higher end. But that Purdue and Florida would maybe be the one that you could argue is interchangeable. And I think they even spoke to that a little bit yesterday on the reveal show that um, it came down to those being pretty close. I don't know. I was trying to see where net. Yeah, so Purdue 6 in net, Florida 7. Purdue's other resume metrics are actually a good bit stronger. So yeah, so that might have been part of it, like that, which is actually, Florida's 11th in KPI, strength of record, wins above bubble, and Purdue's like 5 and 6 and all of those. So that might have been what ultimately gave him the edge there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the NCAA team sheet ranks on Torvik. It kind of puts together what all the metrics that the committee looks at, and they are really pretty similar. You know, both teams are 8-5 again quad one. Purdue is 4-0 in quad two. Florida is 7-1. So maybe it's just that one quad two loss could be the difference there. And I'm looking at their schedules down the stretch. Purdue's got Michigan State at home, then Wisconsin at home, and then they got to go to Ohio State. Probably win all those games, but they could slip up against one of those teams. And Florida has Arkansas at home. Got to go to Kentucky. Got to go to Texas, which is kind of in a tricky spot to play in the SEC this year. So probably gonna be favored in most of those games, if not all. But again, you could always trip up at Rupp. So definitely some quad one games for them left down the stretch. I think those two teams are something to monitor going forward. Florida's probably going to win the SEC. I don't know if they've clinched the outright title yet. And Purdue's obviously not going to win the Big Ten. I think Michigan clinched when Illinois lost at least a share of it. So maybe does the committee factor winning your conference or winning your conference tournament? We'll see. But yeah, I kind of agree that those two teams are kind of a toss up. And then especially with, you could put Houston in the conversation for the 1 seed before their loss to Arizona. But after that, I think it kind of probably will solidify them in the 2 seed unless, I haven't looked at their schedule the rest of the way. I'm sure they got some tough competition in the Big 12 tournament. So who knows? Maybe if they go on to win the Big 12 tournament, they could sneak back in the one, especially if they get another shot at Arizona heads up. But yeah, to me, I think the committee got the 1 and 2 right so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, Houston goes to Kansas tomorrow.
Okay,
Um,
big one.
and then, Colorado, Baylor, Oklahoma State. So 3-1 or maybe 4-0. It will probably, just like you said, depend on if any of those other teams in front of them slip up a little bit more and the record and the resume favor Houston. But yeah, I think, as far as the twos go, that was about what I expected. I didn't expect Florida to be above Purdue. Um, but I think I could see where there's a case for it.
Yeah. Before we hop to the 3 seed line, with those top 8 teams, are we saying all 8 of them are true title contenders? We think they could hoist it at the end of March, April?
I don't know if Purdue is. UConn's
7.
looked a little shaky. Um, but are both the teams contenders? Sure. Do I think either of those teams? I don't know. I mean, with Dan Hurley, you never want to count him out, especially in
Yeah.
March. And Purdue, they're obviously talented. They had Gus Johnson speaking Hebrew on Friday, but um, I don't think Purdue's going to win the title. But you never know.
The was it Mark Titus, the analogy about Purdue being
Yeah.
a suburb
Yeah,
suburb
dominate the
AAU team?
suburbs, but when they play the inner city teams,
Yeah, it's a little bit different. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, I think of those top 8, yeah, UConn's the other one that just hasn't shown a lot. Like the offensive firepower hasn't quite been enough for me to think that they can go do it. But yeah, like Josh said, don't count out Dan Hurley. They've got the guys. So, but I would lean towards maybe 6 or 7 of
Mhm.
those 8.
Ben, what are your
Well,
thoughts on Illinois as a national title contender?
you know, they ripped my heart out last night, but I watched a little bit in the first half. I've watched them multiple times throughout the year. I really trust Wagler down the stretch, and I think that if he's hitting shots and scoring like he has been, I think so. I think that they can win it all. In fact, they're kind of a sneaky pick right now with all those top, 4 or 5 teams kind of separating themselves. I honestly like the value at Illinois right now. I think they've got depth. They're a great rebounding team. And again, if Wagler's hitting those shots in March, again, we've talked about it time in and time out. There's going to be a time when you're facing a hot team and you need a guard to come hit a big shot or stop a run. And I think Wagler has all the capability to do that. So I do think they have the pieces to make a run.
Fourth and Kim Pom.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're pretty solid. Going to UCLA is a tough place, and obviously that was a letdown game for them. And UCLA was kind of reeling and really needed that win. But yeah, I watched a decent amount of Illinois this year. They're like you said, they're got height everywhere. They're relentless on the offensive glass. When we played them, granted we're a terrible rebounding team, but they had multiple possessions where they had 2 or 3 offensive boards that ended in a bucket where it's kind of devastating and it's really, you know, crushing when you get a couple stops in a row, but they keep getting the offensive board and eventually if you give Wagler enough shots, he can make one. So I agree with you, Payne.
Now, before we hop to the 3 again, like, how do we feel about Houston? This is a team I've gone back and forth on. I think we all had them as our preseason title champion. What are any causes for concern, or do we think that they've got they're playing well enough with the roster that they've got to make a run?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised they lost at home to Arizona, but obviously Arizona's a good team, even though they didn't have P in that game. But I do think they have all the pieces to make a run. I mean, they've shown the past couple of years they've made runs. They got experience at the guard position. They got Fleming's young guard. We kind of were talking about the group chat about Snack, about like the role that he plays. So I agree. I think they're like I don't know if I had a pick today, I probably would change my pick, but preseason, I think that was it was obviously it wasn't a like going out on a limb because all 3 of us picked them, but I still feel pretty good that they're going to probably make the Final Four or at least the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I'm good with them still. Arizona's. I think after Arizona lost 2 in a row and the hype sort of shifted off of them to Michigan and Duke, they just reminded everybody yesterday how good they really are. For me, that was more about Arizona yesterday than it was an indictment on Houston. Every game they've lost has been by like 3 to 5 points. I think the worst team they lost to was Tennessee, like way earlier in the year. But yeah, I think they'll be good. I think they've got the makeup, and obviously, Kelvin Sampson's not a bad guy to have over on your sideline. So I'm not too worried about them. It'd be huge if they could somehow sneak up to that one line and get into the South region because it's in Houston for the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight. But that'll probably again rely on some other teams' outcomes for them to be able to get up there. But no, I'm still sitting good with Houston as far as being a title contender.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys said. That Arizona game, try not to look too much into it as far as Houston goes. I was very surprised how out physical they were. Usually, Kelvin
Yeah.
Sampson's team is very physical. And I guess when looking at the stats, Sanak has performed. I guess what I meant when I called him out in our group chat, a lot of his points come from jump shots outside the perimeter. They don't have a big inside the paint presence, and it kind of showed against Awaka and God Krivas. Like they got
Hmm.
bullied inside, and it felt like the more physical team was Arizona. And that's not saying like that's not pushing a panic button by any means, as Arizona's a very good team. But I don't know how many times these last 5 years when we've talked about Houston as a title contender, how many times you're saying that they're getting out physical. Um,
Yeah,
but
it's a good point.
I like where they're at. I think they have the capability to do it, but maybe just a minor cause for concern. But as we go into the 3 seed line, we've got our number 1 3 seed Florida, number 2 3 seed Kansas, number 3 3 seed Nebraska, and our number 4 3 seed Gonzaga.
What a fun group.
Yeah, it was good to see Gonzaga split the series with Pacific last night and with a nail biter. Florida to me is a 2 3 seed. I think they're pretty good on that line. I kind of think Nebraska is good on that line. Gonzaga, I'm not a big believer in them right now. I think analytics like them probably a little more than what I've seen from them when watching live. And who knows with Kansas? Kansas is a team I've been wrong about every single week. You don't know what you're going to get from Darren Peterson. They've got Flagg in their back pocket, which they have utilized to a T this year, and they do
For
most
now.
years. But then they have Peterson for 37 minutes at home against Cincy, and they lose by 20. So I don't have a pulse on this team. I think they could be as talented as a 2 seed, and I think they could be a 5 seed all at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there with the Peterson situation. I mean, there's been stuff all over the internet about it, and people are debating whether he should be drafted number one, and with whatever question marks are out there. But you would like to think, at least just as a basketball fan, that he's going to be full steam ahead for the tournament. And it feels like sort of a load management situation. Maybe some of those injuries are still lingering, but yeah, I mean, he's playing full minutes in some of these games, and they were terrible yesterday. So I don't, yeah, they're all over the place. They look unbeatable at times, and you know, they look like they did yesterday sometimes. So I think where they're at least before that game yesterday, was the right spot on that three line. But man, they're a big question mark, and it'll be interesting to see, in a huge game tomorrow that they get at home against Houston. How do they show up for that?
Yeah, they've just been inconsistent this year.
Yeah,
And that game, like you said yesterday, or like you said, Hunter, that game yesterday, it looked like Peterson played what, like 35 minutes or something, but it looked
like
like they
most of the
hadn't.
game.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like they hadn't played together at all year. Like they're especially down the stretch, they just looked disorganized. Didn't never really got into flow, it felt like. And credit to Cincinnati, they've sneaky been. I think I saw since like February 4th or 5th, Cincinnati is like fifth on Torvik for team rating. Like they've been playing some really good basketball in the month of February. But yeah, as far
Interesting.
as Kansas goes, they just very consistent. I wouldn't want to play them in the tournament. We talk all the time about how
Yeah.
guards can take over a game, and Darren Peterson is like the epitome of that. So I would try to avoid that region if I'm a 2 seed or a 1 seed if I'm them. But they could also be a team that loses in the second round if they're show up like they did yesterday. And then yeah, Gonzaga. I don't know, man. Gonzaga is so interesting to me. They're not super high on the analytical sites this year, but they're still fifth in net. They have one quad one loss and a quad three loss, obviously, the Pacific earlier in the year. Those are their only two losses of the season. Um, you would think they probably won't lose the rest of the way, and then you kind of just see what happens with them in March. But yeah, I don't know. They're not a team I would trust in March to make a deep run. But I think they have the ability to. Um, and then yeah, we touched on Florida a bit when we were talking about the 2 seeds, but to me they're the most complete team from this group. If they can just have a game where they get hot from behind three, which isn't easiest for them, they're not built that way, but in a game by game basis, it could happen. They're a team that can knock off anyone. So yeah, Florida to me is a team that I would be scared to play if I were a 2 seed in that in the Elite Eight matchup.
It's a good point you made on Florida, and they've been red hot right now. Can they get hot from three? You see that that's a glaring weakness and something that, becomes a big factor in March. They've started playing Urban Olzavar. Sorry if I mispronounced that, a lot more.
Hmm.
He is probably a little bit of a defensive weakness compared to Lee and Fland, but he is a great shooter. He's shooting 39% from three, and he's been averaging 11 points their last 8 games. So maybe they found a little, a patch of duct tape to patch that hole, and maybe they can utilize it in March, especially being like with the front court that they have defensively. You can maybe drop off a little on the defensive end if you need that scoring. uh that is a team to me that I was out on early in the year, but is turning a corner at the right time. We can hop on to our 4 seed line. The number 1 4 seed is Texas Tech. The number 2 4 seed is Michigan State. The number 3 4 seed is Vanderbilt, and the number 4 4 seed is Virginia.
Yeah, I'm happy that the committee left Texas Tech here. I think they deserve it. It's a shame that Toppin's not going to play in the tournament, but I think I mean, they were playing Kansas State yesterday, but I was watching a bit of that game, and their offense was looked just as good as it did with Toppin. Obviously, Kansas State not a great team, had just fired their coach, but Christian Anderson's a great guard, and we always go back to the guards in March. So I'm happy that they kept them at the 4 line. I don't think they're going to as serious as contenders as they were before, but I still think that they Sweet 16, Elite Eight potential for them. Michigan State, they're wrapping up their game right now against Ohio State. It looks like they're gonna win a close-ish one. They're up like 5 or 6 right now at home against Ohio State, which is a good lot or good for Indiana and Auburn fans who need Ohio State to keep losing.
Yeah.
But Michigan State to me is another team that I think maxes out the second weekend, kind of like they did last year. I don't see them
Yeah.
knocking off one of those elite teams in an Elite Eight, but they're going to be give a top team like all their effort, and you're going to have to work hard to beat them. But I think at the end of the day, the talent will kind of wear Michigan State down, even though they're going to be diving on the boards for the loose balls and rebounds and whatnot. And then Vanderbilt and Virginia. Vanderbilt to me is a team that has to get hot from three to win. And they can, their guards, I feel like got off to a really hot start. They've kind of been a little bit streaky recently. They kind of, I don't want to say they choked that Tennessee game yesterday, but they easily could have won that game. And that's a game at home that you want to win. So I would imagine they might fall off of the 4 seed currently after losing that game at home to Tennessee. And then Virginia, they kind of been going sneaky under the radar. Don't know too much about them to be honest, but I'm excited to watch them in March.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. They asked about Texas Tech, and they said that they actually had them on the 3 line until the drop. It was actually a drop to 4 because of
Interesting.
the top end injury. Which I mean, if you go look, like I took notice yesterday, like they're because they called out for several teams like their top 3 wins or their 3 best wins.
Duke.
Texas Tech has Duke, Arizona, and Houston. Like that's as good as anybody's top 3 in the country.
100%.
Um, so I did think that was interesting that it was actually, not so much leaving them there as it was they actually did take a hit. They had them higher. And then obviously, you got to factor in the top and injury because it's the roster that you're entering the tournament with that you're graded on. So yeah, I think there's some potential to still make a decent little run to the second weekend, but I think it probably caps out there. Michigan State, very different team, but similar deal, I would say, kind of similar to how they were last year. I think the offensive ceiling just kind of caps them out at a certain point when you start getting up against some of the best competition in the country. So I could see a fairly similar outcome for them. Vandy, yeah, they obviously lost yesterday. Probably right now would be maybe Alabama or Arkansas jumps into that conversation above Vandy, at least for right now. And then who am I forgetting? Who's the last one? Virginia. Man, I didn't realize they only had 3 losses. I for some reason in my head had it maybe they had like 5 or 6, but I was looking at their schedule. Their schedule is pretty
week.
pretty soft. It's
Yeah.
I mean, it's still credit to Ryan Odom and credit to Peyton for calling a shot on the coach of the year there because he very well could win it. But yeah, man, I was going back looking down their schedule, even conference play, like, and they do play Duke next Saturday as part of a another pretty loaded day of games. Um, I was trying to see where their some of their resume. I mean, the resume metrics aren't bad. They're kind of
No,
around like 13, 14 range for each of those. They're 16th in net. So
6-2 in quad one.
yeah,
Impressive. Other
yeah,
losses in quad two, so no bad losses on the resume.
yeah.
If um if you were gonna replace one of these last four teams, who would you replace and who would it be with?
I think Hunter nailed it after the Vanderbilt loss. Probably look at one of those other SEC teams with the Arkansas. Probably Bama. I guess they just won that head-to-head matchup, so maybe you have to give them the nod. But personally, I would rather play Bama in the tournament than Arkansas. But I would have to look at the metrics to decide which one.
Yeah,
They said that those were the next two, like the next two out, essentially,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I think so.
Which one was 17? Do you remember, Hunter?
I think it was Alabama.
It was
I think it
Bama.
was out
Okay.
because they just had the head to head
Yeah.
earlier in the week. Um, yeah, Arkansas's a little bit higher in net. Well, two spots. But I mean, Bama's played one of the hardest schedules in the country, so their strength of record and wins above bubble and stuff like that is pretty high. They're 10th in both of those. So the resume definitely favors Alabama. So yeah, I would probably say, and I think Vandy. This is how close stuff is that we're like splitting hairs over single game stuff. I think Bama has a head to head over. No, Vandy beat Bama at Vandy, I think, a couple
Yep.
weeks ago.
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, I would probably after yesterday pull Vandy out of there and put Alabama in there. As much as many of our listeners probably don't want to hear that.
All right. Out of those, last eight teams, Florida, Kansas, Nebraska, Gonzaga, Virginia, Vandy, Texas Tech, Michigan State, I'll even give you Bama and Arkansas. Those 10 teams, can any of them win the title?
I mean, I think the answers would be Florida if one of them can. Um, and yeah, I'll say Florida can win the title. Another one of those situations where I don't think they will. I kind of put them in the same category as maybe Purdue and Iowa State to me. They're kind of in that second tier for me. Maybe third tier if you put like Illinois and Houston in the second tier outside of Michigan, Duke, and Arizona. Kind of how big you want to have your tiers. But I think they're a Final Four contender, title contender, yes, but definitely not one of the favorites.
Yeah, I agree on Florida. I think for Kansas, the stars would just have to crazy align, and everything would have to come together at the right time, which we haven't really seen that happen over a span of multiple games for them all year. But again, when they've been good, they've been really good. So I guess you can say that the potential's there, but I don't expect it to happen. I think they've been too inconsistent all year.
And then Nebraska, I think with them, you gotta walk before you run. I'm pretty sure they said this last year during their tournament game that they're the only Power Five team that has never won an NCAA tournament game before. So
Yeah.
let's get their first
That's
win
crazy.
first. Let's get them to the Sweet 16, and then um, you know, keep your cell phones away from Hoiberg.
Yeah, good Lord. What a ridiculous statement after the game.
Yeah,
I'm
I was just say I favor Michigan State over Nebraska pretty significantly, and I think they're both kind
Interesting.
of defensive minded. I mean, if you look at Ken Palm, like they're fifth and sixth in defense. Nebraska's 50th, 51st in offense on Ken Palm. That's not great if you want to be a national title or a Final Four contender. Not saying it couldn't happen, but um, I think in terms of a team that could do some damage and push for Elite Eight, Final Four type team, I would favor Michigan State and Tom Izzo and some guys that have been sort of been there before.
Yeah, I would agree. But Nebraska's been, I feel like people in the media, probably us as well, have kind of been waiting for the shoe to fall off on them, but they really haven't. They've been a very
Yeah, I
impressive team
mean,
this year.
all the credit to them. Certainly don't want to downplay the kind of season they've had because it has been really, really impressive and a really good Big Ten. I just, I'm not sure that the offense is going to quite get them where they're trying to go. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like let's just win some tournament games. I think a second weekend for them would be a hell of a year.
Oh yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think they're likely to make the second weekend, but I think that's as far as they'll go, and they could lose in the second round too as well. I mean, all these teams could lose in the second round. That's what we love about March.
Yeah, if they come up on like a BYU or a Tennessee that's like a 6 seed or something like that, it could
Yeah.
certainly happen in the second round.
Yeah, well, now the entertaining part for I guess the majority of our listeners, inadvertently and good for content, the bubble watch. Um, the list I've got, and you guys feel free to chime in if there's an updated one or a better one. But I'm going off Joe Lenardi's list from yesterday afternoon. We'll hit on the last four buys and the last four teams in, kind of, your 8 teams to watch these last 3 to 4 games plus conference tournament. Our last four buys, Lenardi's got UCF, then UCLA, then Josh's Indiana Hoosiers, and Hunter and I's Auburn Tigers. I think this is a good kind of liaison into advocating why our team should be in, what they need to do the remaining way of the schedule, and maybe how they could not be in. I guess, Josh, I'll kick it to you. According to Lenardi yesterday, he has Indiana as the last four teams with a bye. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about what they need to do, what they have done, and why they should be in the tournament?
And
Yeah. So
I'll
go ahead.
add to Josh. Torvik T Rankatology has Indiana as the last 9 seed, nowhere near the bubble. So and that's as of today.
Yeah.
So just another sort of different perspective from the bracketology side.
Yeah, I think if the season ended today, we're in. And I don't think we're gonna be in we would be in Dayton if the season ended today. That being said, I think there's still some work to do in the team's eyes and in the committee's eyes, but we control our destiny completely. 4 regular season games left. We got at home against Northwestern, at home against Michigan State, at home against Minnesota, and then at Ohio State to close out the year. To me, 3-1 gets you into the tournament without any sweat. So most obvious path for that would be beating Northwestern and Minnesota at home. You would hope you would be able to do that. If you lose to one of those teams, probably don't deserve to make the tournament if you lose to one of those teams at home. And then you got to pick up either Michigan State at home or at Ohio State. And honestly, Michigan State at home, that's crazy that it might sound, might be an easier game for us to win. It's Sunday afternoon, so should be a good crowd there. Playing at Ohio State's not necessarily like the toughest place to play in the Big Ten, but that's also going to be a huge game for them. They're probably one of the first four, next four teams out currently. I just mentioned that their game against Michigan State right now, that went final, so that's another quad one opportunity that they missed. So it won't be quad unless we shoot up the net rankings. I don't into the top 30 would be the only way that'd be a quad one for them for our game, which I guess is possible. But either way, pick up one of Michigan State, one of Ohio State, and I think you're fine regardless of what happens in the Big Ten tournament. I would say if you lose both those games, go 2-2, beat Northwestern, beat Minnesota, lose Michigan State, lose Ohio State. Probably need one or two in the Big Ten tournament. And I wouldn't be mad at the committee at all if they kept us out, even if, let's say we beat like I don't know, like Minnesota again, or like even like who's like right around 10. Maybe like you knock off in Iowa. Like even if you still pick that up, if you lose to one of Northwestern and Minnesota, then, you know, I still see it as being justified for being left out. So definitely control our own destiny, but there's still some work to do. And yeah, that Ohio State game is gonna be massive.
So you think 20 wins is where you
Yeah,
need to be?
I think 20, and that put us at I think 11-9 in the Big Ten. Um, you
That
know,
that should be
yeah,
in my
and
opinion.
yeah, and to me, we don't have as many quad one wins as a lot of other teams on the bubble, but we don't really have any bad losses outside the Minnesota loss, and that ended up being a quad two loss. I was worried for a second that was going to fall to quad three, but Minnesota's had a fine year, so it's not too bad losing at Minnesota. You would like to avenge it at home with a double digit win there, but yeah, I feel like 11-9 in the Big Ten should be good enough. But ideally we keep it out of the committee's hands, go 4-0,
Yeah.
and can get one a 9 or 8 seed. But feeling pretty solid. You make the tournament in Darren DeVries' first year. Even if you lose the first round game, I'd say it's a B minus season. If you can knock off a team in the first round, then B plus season, maybe A minus, depending upon how it all shakes out. So definitely some stuff to be excited about, definitely some stuff to improve on for next year. But yeah, not too upset about where we are in this current position. And I will say it does help. We have the head to head against UCLA. If it does come down to that, they're looking like another team that's going to be on the bubble. So UCLA head to head, then hopefully we get the Ohio State head to head, and that will kind of separate us from the other two Big Ten teams on the bubble.
You haven't played Ohio State already, right? It's
Yeah, just
just
one
one left.
matchup.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, a Big Ten team that as good as the top of that league has been, if you're 11-9 in the league and you're 20-11, that's a tournament team, in my opinion. So yeah, hopefully, hope you guys go 3-1. What three? You're 17-10 right now,
Yeah, 3-1 is the goal.
so it'd be 2011. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's the conference tournament's always weird. There are sometimes where it seems to matter more for bubble teams than it does like at the
Hmm.
top, your 1 through 5 seeds in terms of like movement that happens that week. Um, but obviously, if you're on the bubble, like every extra piece of evidence is going to matter for teams that are on the fringe. So, um, but yeah, hopefully you guys can get to 20 or 21 before conference tournament starts and not even have to worry about it. Our uh, first round Auburn Indiana hopes are hanging on by a thread, but it's not impossible at this point. I'd say I'd probably have to be a 8-9 game, I guess, which might be tough.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't think anyone's getting to the 7 line.
no. And to get to the 8 line, I think Indiana would have to win out in regular season and probably make the semis at least of the Big Ten tournament. So I'd see that as pretty unlikely as well, but you
Yeah.
never know.
I'll go ahead and speak for the group. If we do play first round, we should totally live stream it somehow. Figure that
That would be sick.
out.
We could play in Dayton. Actually, I take that
That is
back.
true. That is
Yeah.
a pretty realistic possibility, honestly.
That's probably more likely than playing in the first round is playing in the first four.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but
Well, I
yeah,
guess
no, seems like a fairly manageable stretch. You guys can finish it out strong, and yeah, that Michigan State game will be fun next Sunday.
Yeah, I'm excited.
big game. Well, Hunter, I guess I'll kick it to you. We're slightly behind Indiana as the last team in the last 4 buys, according to Joe Lenardi yesterday. Is your Auburn Tigers 15-12, 6-8 in the SEC, 32 in net. Really holding on to that number one SOS right now as a
Yeah,
big rationale as to why we should be in. But do you kind of want to walk us through, the season up until this point and what we need to do?
yeah. I mean, I'll start by saying that's the only reason that we're even hanging on with the record that we have at this point is the resume and the schedule that we played. Still have 5 quad 1 wins, which is decent. Obviously, last night was huge. After I think going into the last 5, we said or 6 maybe beat the teams you were supposed to beat. I had kind of chalked Kentucky and the Alabama game as losses, and that would get us to I guess 18-13, and I felt like that was a good spot. Um, Dropped that Mississippi State game earlier in the week, and things were looking grim. But came back last night, got a huge win against Kentucky, and I think we're kind of right back in that spot. Torvik actually has us as the top 10 seed right now. So we're 5 spots inside the bubble, 1 spot behind where he has Indiana as the last 9 seed. Um, this is going to be like one of the worst. If we make the tournament, it's going to be one of the worst records, I think, probably to ever make the tournament. I don't know what the most amount of losses a team has had that made it in. Probably, I guess, probably like 13 or 14. Um, but four games left, three of which we should be considerable favorites. Ole
You
Miss and
think we're
LSU.
favorites at Oklahoma? I kind of think that we might come in as dogs.
Oklahoma's they've been tricky. They're a game below 500, but um, they've
Torvik has you as point 0.4 favorites right now, so essentially a toss
okay,
up.
Yeah.
so fairly close. It's not gonna be an easy game by any means. We just went and lost at Mississippi State, who I think was last in the SEC earlier this week. Um, don't have a choice. Got to win it. So yeah, I think 3-1 would put us at 18-13, which really, depending on what happens in the tournament, SEC tournament, you probably pick up a 14th loss. I think that has to be worst case in terms of what you can get in with. I think if you get to 18-13 with a top three, top four strength of schedule, handful of quad one wins, I think that should be enough. I don't know for sure. It obviously kind of is contingent on what some of the other teams on the bubble have going on, but it's pretty obvious at this point that the schedule we've played is what's carrying us. We do have arguably the best win in the SEC on the road at Florida. Not sure there's one I'd put up against that in terms of like a quality win. You have a neutral against St. John's, which is holding up pretty nicely. They've been playing good basketball. Um, so
20-point
you've
win
got
against
some,
Arkansas.
yeah, dog walked Arkansas. They got us back in the return game in Fayetteville, but again, another really good looking win on the resume. So yeah, I think go 3-1. It's gonna be tough to win in Tuscaloosa, but that rivalry's always got some crazy shit going on, so you never know. It was a close game in Auburn. I don't think there's any reason to believe that we couldn't go win that game, but um,
Wouldn't that be sweet to punch your ticket with a win at Bama?
absolutely, yeah, no doubt. And I think that would get us to what 9-9 in SEC play.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're 6-8 right now. 3-1 gets you to 9-9. In a 10 or 11 bid league. I think that should be enough. But again, if you take some ugly losses or, you know, lose more than two of these four regular season games, I think you're seriously in trouble at that point. But a little bit of life breathed into him last night after that Kentucky win for sure.
Yeah, I again agree with everything you said. Seems been very frustrating to watch all year.
I didn't even go
But
into like what trying to rationalize what's going on or what's been going wrong. I was just like, I'm tired of trying to make it make sense.
How have
this
you fared against some of the other bubble SEC teams? What would that be like? Missouri, Texas?
lost one,
Beat
Yeah.
Texas and Auburn, lost to Missouri at Missouri,
lost to A&M.
um, lost to A&M and Auburn. Well, debatable. Um, I think those are the main ones, right?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, let's see. Torvik has Texas as the last four bye, Missouri as the last team in. Um, yeah, and then wins against Florida and Arkansas, losses against pretty much anyone else. Well, and Kentucky, which Kentucky, man, look out because they're with a fairly decent record. Their net ranking was kind of low, and if things were to spiral a little bit there, they could very well be in this bubble conversation.
Yeah, I mean they're just a 8 seed on Torvik right now, so they're definitely trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and Georgia's an 8 seed too. We lost to them, so probably roughly right around 500 against a handful of other bubble teams in the conference. Win against NC State, who they're
Hmm.
trending upward.
St.
You
John's
know,
trending upward.
yeah, Florida
Very,
obviously is
yeah.
rolling. So there's some good wins in there. And I think A&M is the only one that's a double check that a quad two loss, unless Mississippi State, obviously. Yeah, we're 5-10 against quad one. We're 7-12 against quad one and two. So we're 2-2 in quad two, which doesn't help. But um,
5 quad 1 wins is probably more than a lot of teams in that like 4 to 6 range have. Maybe not with amount of losses, but just
yeah, I mean
based off your schedule.
it's more than St. John's, more than Iowa. There's several, and 15 quad one games is probably about as many as
It's
anyone.
probably you and Bama, honestly.
Yeah, Duke's played 15. They're 13-2. Good Lord. Um, yeah.
This team is so frustrating, and honestly, I don't think. I mean, you can look at all the analytics and strength of schedule, and I'm not really sure where the number one strength of schedule has like analytics built into it. But
Well,
you
it's
know,
I'll tell you because this probably is something a lot of people are curious about. So you hear them talk about like wins above bubble. Essentially, that is how the average bubble. It's a metric measuring like how many games the average bubble team would win against your schedule. How many games have you won above whatever that metric is? Evan Mia's got a good page on his website, but that's essentially like when you're talking about and wins above bubble is one of the bigger metrics that they look at as part of that team sheet with net and strength of record and KPI. And I think Ken Palm and Torvik even play into it a little bit, but um, it's essentially like comparing what would the average bubble team do against your schedule, and they have some sort of metric for it. How have you performed in comparison to what the expected number of wins would be for an average bubble team? So um, I think it definitely plays a factor, and it's why we're the only team with 12 losses that's even remotely in the field at this point.
okay,
So
I brought that up just because I know we've played, the hardest schedule. I mean, I guess analytically in the entire country, but you got to factor in that 4 or 5 of those games. I mean, did we really play in them? I mean, like we got destroyed by
yeah,
Purdue, we got destroyed by Arizona, we got destroyed by Michigan. I mean, again, all great teams. I again don't necessarily think this team deserves to be in the tournament. I see a lot of scenarios where we're not in the tournament. I will say the good news: you've played a lot of these top teams. You've proven you can beat anyone. If you get in, I think there is some confidence that you could win one, maybe even 2 games. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there is that possibility, though. That ceiling is still there.
yeah, it is. I think as rough as the last before last night, what was that, 5 straight losses?
Yeah.
I got to a point where I was like, just get in, just make the tournament, and anything that happens on that is, you know, cherry on top. Um, just with the way that things were trending, yeah, I think you could go in and be a 7 seed, depending on matchup and who it is for sure. Still would rather be a 10 seed, I think, than an 8-9. Um, just with the off chance that you can beat the 7, and then I think you feel better about trying to pick off a 2 seed than you do Arizona or Duke or Michigan. But yeah, I'm really at this point at 15-12. I'm like, just get in. Anything else that happens after that would be super cool.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you guys want to talk on? I can sign us off with our pick standings. Any other call outs heading into these last
Oh,
3 games?
yeah. Shifting gears a little bit. I sent you guys this earlier in the week, and we don't have to spend more than like 5 minutes on it. Where would Cooper Flagg be drafted in this if he had stayed in this class and not reclassified? Or let's just go. I guess it depends. Like, would he go before any of Peterson,
I
DeBance, and
think he
Boozer?
might. Like if he had the same saying, if he had Duke, the season he had at Duke last year, this year, or would it be the season he would have as like a 19-year-old or an 18-year-old? Because I
Oh,
think if
it's
he
tough to say too because he and
he would
Boozer
have
would
been better.
theoretically both
True.
be playing for Duke. So I think just comparing like what he did last year to the guys that are in this class, and like, yeah, he's probably the Peterson thing's tough because our team's going to flag him for whatever, sitting out or teammate issues there might be there.
I mean, I'd take him over Boozer. I think it really would come down to, Peterson and DeBonsta. I'd probably take Cooper Flagg. If he had the year he had last year, or even if he had another year of experience in high school, let's say he had a slightly better year this year in college than he'd had it last year in college. I mean,
Yeah.
he's pretty well rounded. Obviously Peterson and DeBansta the whole entire freshman class this year is great, but I'd probably still pick him one. And obviously that could probably be biased too, knowing what we know how well he's playing the NBA too. I'd probably have some inherent
Yeah.
bias in that coming in, but it's hard not to pick him.
I'd take him 4
Whoa.
or 5. I have 4 guys so that I like a little bit more than him.
Is Thomas
Personally,
Houck one of those guys?
no. That being said, I think if Haug was on Duke's team and was getting, as I've said multiple times, getting, 40% of the shot load and all of that media attention, I think maybe there's a case. But Flagg's been great. And again, I'm definitely been coined a Flagg hater. But I think Boozer's a better shot maker. And he's arguably a better passer. I think he's a little less athletic, maybe weaker as a wing defender. I don't know what he's going to play in the NBA. Is he going to play undersized center? Are they going to stretch
Yeah,
him?
he's more of a post guy than Flagg was. He's
So
more
a
of a
little
true
less
power forward, in
versatile.
my opinion.
I think he's the same exact player as Diabanza. I think Diabanza gets his shot a little better. Peterson, I think if you're getting a version of Peterson, he's very good. Obviously, and at 4 I would have Caleb Wilson. I'll take Caleb Wilson over him. I think very similar build. Honestly, very similar player. I like the athleticism and the shot making a little more with Wilson.
Is there
So Flagg's averaging 26 and a half and 4 as a rookie in the NBA. And honestly, he kind of got not a slow start, but he's been much better the past couple of weeks. Do you think that any of those guys would have that freshman year, or do you think maybe 3 years from now, when both of them are in the league, like DeBonsta and Flagg are in the league, that's when you're looking to take them?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was more so like the project, like as a prospect, the projection over, of a guy you're drafting to change your franchise. I don't know, man. I think Debanza has an argument just because I think he's a much more pure scorer, and that's what the NBA. I think that's even more valued in the NBA. I don't watch much NBA these days, so hard for me to sit here and pretend to be a scout. I think I like the overall scoring upside and a guy that can be, a 25 point plus every season type scorer on your team for Debanza. And then Peterson, yeah. If you're talking strictly basketball, I think I'm taking Peterson as well. If you throw out all the off the court stuff and just a 6'3", is he 6'3", 6'4" point guard that can, score it the way he can, that's like one of the most valuable things you can have in the game, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, luckily they're all going to be the NBA for the next 10 years, so we'll see how it
Yeah.
plays out.
Yeah, man, there's just so many. You go down the list. I mean, if Michael Brown gets in there, he could change a franchise. Kingston Fleming's, Acuff, like stupid.
Good question. Good question. Well, we'll send you guys off with our updated record and pick standings. I'm sure you have seen on the Instagram if you listen to the podcast where we are at. It is a complete 2-horse race. Hunter has slowly pulled away. I mean, not pulled away, but he's got a 2-game lead on Josh at 46 and 47. Josh coming in at second at 44 and 49. And me coming in 9 games below Hunter, 7 games below Josh, and 19 games below 500 at 37 and 56. It looks like I will be dealing out $50 to one of you two. Before we go, Josh, if you close the season strong and you win our pick standings, from a value perspective included as well, where do you think you would put your $50 free dollars?
I mean, value wise, we kind of talked about when we were talking about them in the seedings. Would be a
Yeah.
good one. Might be a square and just go on Duke. I haven't looked at the odds recently, but I imagine Duke now has the best odds to win. But I'm sure it's still probably pretty close
If
with Michigan.
if FanDuel is up to date, which I'm sure it is, Michigan still slightly over Duke. Plus Michigan's at 370, Duke's 450, Arizona's 500. Then there's a little gap. Houston, Florida, Illinois are the next three.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a square putting $50 free dollars on plus 370 to win March Madness. So I don't know. Um, what are you thinking, Hunter?
Yeah, looking at this, like, is UConn worth a flyer at 1,800? Is Kansas worth a flyer at 3,000? Or like, do I just say take $50 and roll with one of the three big guns? Honestly, Houston at 800, if we are still kind of a believer there and riding with our preseason picks, that might not be a bad spot to put it, but tough to say. I'd probably lean Houston at plus 800 and just get a little bit more of a payout than I would if it was one of the first three.
All right, let's say you got a mortgage, you're behind on a credit card payment, you got $50. What is the craziest odd team that you think, if the stars align perfectly, that you would put your money on? If we're talking like plus 6,000 odds, we're talking like 5 seed or below.
Yeah,
Where would you go?
I mean, I don't have the odds up, but I'm thinking guards. I'm thinking Louisville. I'm thinking Wisconsin with their backcourt
I was
duo.
gonna say Wisconsin. I like that
I'm
pick.
thinking I don't know how far down Arkansas would be. It'll probably be one of those three teams. It's kind of
Not
like
Man, Arkansas is actually up there a little bit. They're right there between Kansas and Gonzaga. Louisville, you could get at 6,000.
I mean, Kentucky. They're still talented.
Kentucky, you can get at 10,000. That's what I was just thinking. Yeah, I mean, if like, is Caleb Wilson out for the year?
I
I don't
don't
think
think he
so.
I didn't think
tweeted
so.
that like he'll be back or whatever.
They're at 10,000 if you were trying to take some kind of crazy flyer.
Miami, Ohio, St. Louis.
I am licking my chops for that Miami, Ohio versus Clemson 7-10 matchup or 6-11, whatever it's going to be. That's going to be, I'm going to go straight to that. And it's going to be the first one I write in on my bracket before I go down the line.
Sorry, David Green. Your coach is a choke artist. Well, alrighty. I think that was a good episode of Ball Up Top, episode 10. Continue to tune in. I'm sure our Instagram will be a little more active as we come down the stretch. Bunch of big games. Conference tournament season is around the corner. And then, of course, the greatest postseason, in my opinion, in all of sports, March Madness.
No argument.
We haven't decided yet, but if there's one good thing that'll come out of this podcast, we hope to have a pretty big bracket group. So as we get closer to that, stay tuned to that and continue to, spread the word, trying to grow the brand. Follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or YouTube. But outside of that, hopefully your team's on the right side of the bubble these next couple of weeks.
Peace.
Yeah.